Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Rapid Recap on the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. He's Steve Marik, he's Greg Smith, I'm Zack Carpenter. We're at Memorial Stadium where Nebraska wrapped up its 11th spring practice this morning. Afterward, Tony White, defensive coordinator, and linebackers coach Rob Dvoracek met with the media, as well as players AJ Rollins, Elijah Jeudy, Nouredin Nouili, and am I forgetting anybody?
I think that was it.
Stephon
Wynn Jr.
Stephon Wynn Jr. Yep. So 3 defensive linemen, 1 offensive lineman. A lot to take away, I think, mostly defensively. But Steve, where you want to start? What was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, so right away, and I think it was pretty cool of Tony White to do this. He basically admitted that he was putting a little bit too much on the defensive install, asking too much of the players maybe. And he admitted that he was scaling down the defensive install, and he said that he hadn't added anything new the past couple days. And he was very upfront and said, you know, when you're moving guys around as much as they are on the defense right now, just to see what positions guys are truly going to play in the fall. Sometimes it's hard to retain stuff, and I think it was very good of Tony White, and it says a lot about him as a coach to get up in front of media members and say that. So apparently things maybe haven't been going as smoothly as Tony White had hoped with the install, so he's kind of cutting things back, and right now he said it was all about understanding concepts and making sure guys understand where to line up correctly. So I don't think it's too big of a deal, honestly. I mean, it's spring ball. This is what spring ball is for, getting things right. So, but I thought that was really cool of Tony White, the defensive coordinator, just to come out and say, yeah, I might have put too much on these guys, but that's fine. It's spring ball. Let's dial it back a little bit and make sure that we understand where to line up and understand what the concepts are, so when you're out there you understand what your teammate is doing as well as yourself. So
and that actually kind of jives with something. I think he maybe in his very first press conference with us talked about he wants guys who, like, what does he want it to look like when people watch the Nebraska defense? He wants them playing fast and hard, right? And so
simplified.
You can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that if you're thinking all the time. And we've seen that in years past here at Nebraska. Not necessarily Tony White's fault, but you always kind of harken back to that about guys thinking too much out there on the field. So it is really good, and I think refreshing to hear him say that.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to say, because in these coordinator interviews along with Marcus Satterfield too, prior to spring ball, when they were talking about it, they were asked, how much are you going to put on these guys' plates, and they both said, we're going to give them as much as they can handle. And so I think Tony White is giving them the amount that he thought would work, but if it doesn't work, I think that's totally fine. I remember Tony White saying that it's definitely okay if we have to trim things down and maybe save some things for the fall. So I don't think it's a big headline making issue that the defensive players need the install to be trimmed down. I think it's totally normal. Like I said, it's spring ball after all.
Yeah, and getting back to the simplifying of things, I mean, what have we heard from, I think, at least 3 or 4 defensive players, but at least 2 that I could think of off the top of my head, MJ Sherman and John Bullock, who we spoke with recently. It's see ball, get ball.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's flying around. Like, that's the simplified look of it. Maybe that's what it is the first season under Tony White, with how complex that defense could be in the future once it is fully installed. I think maybe just trying to, like with Bill Bush did last year when he took over, is just simplifying things. So they're not thinking out there. They're not a paralysis by analysis, essentially, of, okay, I need to be here, I need to be in this spot, I need to be doing this. This is my first, second, third. It's see ball, get ball, I think.
Yeah, and Tony White said, I need to do a better job of making evaluations, and to make evaluations, you want the guys playing fast, and apparently they weren't playing as fast as he wanted them to play, so he's doing the right thing and cutting things down and going from there.
Yeah, one of those positions I think that I find the most interesting, I think a lot of people find it interesting, is the jack position, because it could be that electric playmaker where you're seeing guys like MJ Sherman, Jamari Butler playing in that spot, and we cleared it up with Rob Dvoracek today. Javen Wright is not practicing in that jack position. I think there was some confusion on that a couple weeks ago.
Too many Buddhas on the team.
Yeah, too many Buddhas. There's MJ Sherman had said Buddha is one of the guys practicing at that position. He apparently was referring to Grant Buddha, not Javen Buddha Wright. So we got that clarified real quick. But Dvoracek did open up a little bit about the Jack? That's sort of an exciting position. I know, Greg, you were over there for that.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because to me, the two big things on this defense that I think are getting the most kind of ink and attention are that Jack position and then the rover position at the next level, right? And part of it is because they're kind of new fun things within this 3-3-5.
Cool names.
Cool names, all of that. They've got that in common. But also, I think it's a recruiting tool as well. Like, and I talked to Willis McGahee, who's the fourth, I think now. There's so many Willis McGahees down in the Miami area, and he said that this coaching staff likes him for that position. So you're starting to get a little bit of a feel for what they're looking for at certain spots on the defense. And I think that defense will kind of be the star of the defense. And we've seen that in years past. Was it Bo Pelini, the Peso? Is that the one that he went with? And so I just think it's really intriguing. Now, Dvoracek, he kind of declined and sidestepped when asked, like, which guys are working there specifically. We know that MJ Sherman is doing it because he told us. He said Dvoracek said everyone has been rolling through that position. We'll see. There, of course, is going to be just a handful of guys on the team that have kind of the athleticism and the size to be able to do that. So that's one thing I'll definitely be looking for in the spring game, but I'm glad we got to hear more about that from Dvoracek today.
Again, he did say Javen Wright is not practicing at Jack, so should we have just ran through the whole roster, like,
just
asked one by one and whoever
and
when he stops and
like Maverick Noonan, no.
Yeah.
Larry Butler, yes.
try to get him off his kilter. I mean, anything else about the defense? I mean, we talk about the simplified, just sprang to my mind. They call him the Mike linebacker, Will linebacker, and then Jack linebacker, like we were talking about. So it's a simple, I guess, simple name for it instead of something like we had talked about. Is it going to be called the Husker or whatever?
Nope,
just going
people names.
Yeah. Anything else on defense before we move to one final note?
Elijah Jeudy was pretty interesting. I think, and that's a guy that I think maybe sometimes get lost when you're thinking about the defensive line, but I think he's going to be in the mix for sure. And he said something cool that I liked. He said that during the recruiting process out of the transfer portal, he, of course, spent 2 years, right, at Texas A&M. He said that the Nebraska coaching staff told him what he needed to hear, not what he wanted to hear. And so I think Elijah Jeudy, he has aspirations at the next level, just like all these guys do, and that's pretty important too. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Put that on a recruiting pitch tweet. I can just see that coming up, right? That's definitely going to happen, especially as the transfer portal opens up here again in a couple of days. I think April 15th it'll open up again. One more takeaway that I had, though, A.J. Rollins was also out here. We got talking about his transition over to defense. It was also really neat to hear Tony White talk about them. He called him a baller. He said that he just keeps showing up and making plays. And Tony White gave a hat tip to Matt Rule and said that was all Coach Rule. Yep. He saw that in him and was able to do that. So that was something that was a big storyline coming into spring. We knew someone was going to switch positions and maybe their career could take off a little bit because that's what Matt Rule has done in his history. It sounds like A.J. Rollins is a prime candidate for that to happen.
There might not be someone on the defense or maybe the entire team that is going to get more eyeballs during the spring game than A.J. Rollins.
Yeah, people will be highly interested in
Everybody's going to be looking at that guy.
And he's a local kid, too.
Oh, yeah. Creighton prep grad, 6'6" on the edge, just getting in the backfield. That's really interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, and then one final thing that, again, just popped in my mind was Tony White talking about that number 2 corner opposite Quentin Newsome. And it's funny because a few days ago I was just quickly going through, right now, a projected depth chart just for me to look back on midway through spring ball, and I got to the number 2 cornerback. I'm like, who the hell is going to be the number 2 corner if they're going to wind up moving Malcolm Hartzog over to a safety role? And then over the next few days, I heard a lot more people talking about that on different podcasts and different interview settings of we don't really truly know who the number 2 corner is. And then Tony White was asked about it today. Do you have a locked-in guy or main candidate essentially for that number 2 role? And he said no. He said he named off a bunch of people. He said Malcolm Hartzog, Tommy Hill, Deshaun Singleton, Javier Morton are all sort of working in, all vying for that spot. And he even mentioned Miles Farmer as a potential corner because of his length.
Steve,
I immediately thought of Steve. I looked over to Steve because we were across the way, and I'm like,
No offense, Tony White. I don't think you should do that with Miles Farmer. I think you should be in the middle of the defense at that rover position and in the tackle box and hitting guys. But anyway, Tony White knows more than I do, so.
Maybe trying to throw some off. Interesting to hear if Miles Farmer actually is practicing, taking reps at corner. That'd be interesting. But yeah, there's a bunch of guys there. So one of the things that we'll be looking for during the spring game to see what the initial guys they trot out onto the field, even though it might be a mix of 1s and 2s for that spring game. But one last note, one offensive player was made available along with the 3 defense players and 2 defensive coaches. So offensive lineman Nouredin Nouili is his first media appearance since he was suspended for last season. He came out with an opening statement right off the top and apologized for putting himself in that situation. And he's an important piece, a really important piece on that offensive line. And I think we saw his absence, how big his absence was, how that was felt last year during the entire season.
Yeah, without Nouili out there, I think there was obviously some shuffling that needed to go around on Nebraska's offensive line. I think he would have been a shoo-in to start at left guard, and that's when Turner Corcoran had to kind of fill in at left guard. But Turner, I think, looked okay at guard, and now
I think he should stay there.
Yeah, for sure. And with Nouili coming back, it just gives you another experienced guy that could play either left or right guard. I don't think he's really a center, or a tackle, but I think he's a starting caliber. I expect him to be a starter somewhere on the offensive line. So having him out there and say that, I think, was good. We all see Nouili walking around, Nori walking around. He's a good, fun-loving guy, jolly guy, and I know he was really disappointed in himself that he put himself in that position and put his teammates in their situation. So good for him to come out here, and it was good to hear him talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially all we have for today. I mean, there was a lot discussed, and I mean, we're kind of getting into crunch time of spring ball with 3 practices left, and then the April 22nd spring game again, counting as that 15th practice. They have a scrimmage on Saturday, 2 days from now, which is probably more impactful and important than the actual spring game because, again, like Greg mentioned a little earlier, April 15th through April 30th is that second transfer window. So Saturday is April 15th. So I'm wondering before or after that scrimmage what happens. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a busy time. I mean, Nebraska's at 101, 103 scholarships. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
it's around 100. I think they're actually
below.
100. Yeah, I think they're actually below 100, but it's around 100. We call it good.
Yeah, so it'll be a busy time for Nebraska football. It'll be a busy time for us at Inside Nebraska. And you can go to our site, nebraska.rivals.com, for all the latest spring ball coverage and transfer portal coverage for men's hoops and for football as that opens up and we see another busy 2-week stretch. Encourage you to like this video and subscribe to the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel so you can get those videos dropped directly into your feed. But for Steve, Marik, and Greg Smith, I'm Zack Carpenter, and we'll catch you guys again next time.